What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 12 top 12 defense rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, you find it helpful, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, feel free to drop them down below. But I do think there are a lot of quality options this week, especially towards the top of these rankings. So we're going to dive right here into Tier 1, starting off with my top 5. In Tier 1, my number one defense is going to be the Broncos going up against the Raiders. The Broncos have just been a straight-up really good fantasy defense this year. They are third in points per game, and I really like this matchup here against the Raiders. They have the seventh lowest implied point total. Defenses going up against the Raiders this season are averaging the second most fantasy points per game. Looks like they're going back to the well with Gardner Minshew. Actually was pretty decent in Week 11, but he's not scaring me. This Raiders offense is not scaring me. I think the Broncos are a very, very strong play. Then also in Tier 1, going to go with the Chiefs going up against the Panthers. Now, the Chiefs haven't been the most amazing fantasy defense. I think they're much better from a real-life perspective, but this is just a very, very safe and nice matchup against the Panthers. The Panthers have the lowest implied point total of the week. Defenses going up against them are averaging the 10th most points per game. Looks like they are going back to the well with Bryce Young at quarterback. He has looked better in his second stint as the starter, but I'm really not worried about this Panthers offense going up against the Chiefs. So I think the Chiefs, very strong play. Then I'm going to have the Steelers going up against the Browns. And across the board, this looks like a very strong matchup here for the Steelers. They are second in points per game. The Browns have the second lowest implied point total. And then defenses going up against the Browns are averaging the third most points per game. So when you hear all of that, I think you could definitely make an argument for them being the number one defense. The only thing that's like kind of holding me back is just the fact that Jameis Winston, he still has that nuclear game in his system where you do typically, want to be playing your defense against Jameis because he's very turnover prone. Defenses can put up points, but you also just have that off chance where he's just going to go completely nuclear, like we saw, I think, in his first start against the Ravens. So I still think the Steelers are a very, very strong play. But if you're wondering why I didn't quite have them up as the number one option, that would be the argument, just the unpredictability of a guy like Jameis Winston. Then also in Tier 1, I'm going to have the Vikings going up against the Bears. The Vikings are leading all defenses in points per game. The Bears have the sixth lowest implied point total. The Bears offense did have a little bit of a bounce back in Week 11. They looked better, still lost, but this is still an offense that has put up under 20 points in 4 straight weeks. This Vikings defense has looked good. They've made good quarterbacks look very human. I think they're a strong play against the Bears. And then the last defense in Tier 1, like I said, pretty top heavy this week. A lot of quality teams here in Tier 1. We're going to go with the Texans going up against the Titans. The Texans are a top 10 defense in points per game. The Titans have the third lowest implied point total. And then defenses going up against the Titans are averaging the most points per game. They've scored 17 or fewer points in 8 of their 10 games this season. I don't see them getting above that number with this matchup here against the Texans, who have been a solid defense, a defense that also just took advantage of another bad matchup, or I guess a favorable matchup against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Now moving into Tier 2, going to start off this tier with the Commanders going up against the Cowboys. This is kind of the tier of maybe sketchy defenses with great matchups or good defenses with average matchups. So for the Commanders here, the Cowboys have the fourth lowest implied point total. We've seen 2 games with Dak out, missing, not starting. In those 2 games, the Cowboys have combined for 17 total points. This is definitely a matchup you want to attack, and you can do that here with the Commanders. Then we're going to have the Lions going up against the Colts. This is the one team that's a pretty solid defense, but not an amazing matchup. The Lions defense are 4th in points per game. The Colts, they have the 10th lowest implied point total, so not awful, but Vegas isn't expecting them to go crazy this week. I will say, Anthony Richardson looked very good in Week 11. I don't know if we're going to be getting that consistently out of him, but it's not looking like just this smash matchup like it would have, based on Richardson's production and play early on in the season. Also in Tier 2, going to go with the Dolphins going up against the Patriots. The Patriots have the 8th lowest implied point total. Defenses going up against this Patriots offense are averaging the 6th most points per game. Dolphins didn't necessarily take advantage of a great matchup in Week 11, but they did have a really nice performance against the Rams offense in Week 10. So they've been fine over the last couple of weeks. think this is a solid spot for them. And then the final defense here in tier 2 is going to be the Buccaneers going up against the Giants. On paper, this looks like a great matchup. The Giants have the 5th fewest implied point total. They're making a quarterback change, going from Daniel Jones to Tommy DeVito. Don't think that's going to be a huge shakeup. I don't think that's going to be like some huge positive for their offense. The one thing that is kind of sketching me out here is sometimes you can fall into the trap of, playing a team just solely based on matchup, which is kind of the play here, but you forget that maybe the defense has really struggled, is not that great. And that's kind of the situation here. It's a really nice matchup, but you look at this Buccaneers defense, they have struggled as of late. These are the total number of points they've allowed in the last 6 games. 23, 30, 31, 41, 51, and 36. They have had a rough schedule as of late, but they definitely have not handled it all that well. So definitely a more favorable matchup, but I will just throw that out there. Keep that in mind if you're thinking they're like some amazing smash play. Now moving into tier 3, tier 4, this is where we're getting into plays that I'm not super confident in. Not great matchups, maybe decent defenses, but they're not the best plays. We're going to go with the Browns going up against the Steelers. This is actually going to be the only team in this tier. The Browns are a fine defense. They're middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points per game. The Steelers are bottom 10 in implied points, so not a super flashy matchup, but they're fine. They're playable if you're desperate. And then getting into tier 4, this could be a larger tier. I really don't feel great about either of these options. We have the Eagles going up against the Rams. Now, the Eagles' fantasy defense has been really solid for 6 straight games. Most of the matchups have been pretty favorable, but they've had a couple of decent teams in there. The Bengals, Commanders, they looked solid. Now, this Rams offense has looked pretty decent when they've had the wide receivers healthy, so I don't think it's a great matchup, but the Eagles are a great defense. They could definitely show out here against the Rams. And then the final team is going to be the Bears going up against the Vikings. The Bears defense has been solid. They're 8th in points per game. The Vikings are tied for the 10th fewest implied points. So a little bit scared of this Vikings offense. Bears defense hasn't looked as great as of late, but I do think they could also be a desperate play. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 12 defenses. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe, check out the running back and wide receiver rankings if you have not seen them already, and then also stay tuned. Tomorrow I will have the quarterback and the tight end rankings. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.